ought to be in pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures.
Hello and welcome to Deep Dive Movie Reviews with my friend Steve Hackman and myself, James Marsh. This episode, we are talking about the Hulu limited comedy series, Only Murders in the Building.
Hey, but you know the drill. Before we get going, if you haven't already subscribed to Deep Dive Movie Reviews, it would be a great favor to us if you went ahead and subscribe just now. And while you're there, go ahead and hit that little bell right next to the subscribe button. That way you're notified every single time we upload a new video. Oh, and just as a reminder, Deep Dive Movie Reviews does contain spoilers, so you have been warned. James?
Okay, so Only Murders in the Building is just finished its second season. Stars Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez as three amateur detectives who all live in the same building on the Upper West Side in Manhattan. And as the title might suggest, start investigating a series of heinous crimes under their own roof. And because they're all infatuated, as many of us have been over the course of the pandemic and what have you, with the true crime podcast subgenre, they decide to launch one of their own titled, what else but Only Murders in the Building. So, Steve, where to begin talking about this one?
I love both these seasons. I'm going to come right out and say, James, this has become a family favorite in our household. There's something about the chemistry of Martin Short, Steve Martin, Selena Gomez that just works. Obviously many of us, especially our age, are familiar with Steve Martin, familiar with Martin Short, but part of their journey for so long, and to see them at this time of their career kind of coming together. And I think Steve Martin has even said this is kind of one of his last things he's going to do. And so he's pleasantly surprised that it has been as well received as it has. But it's just a wonderful, whimsical whodunit that's well written, well acted, and as I mentioned, the chemistry not only of the three leads are spectacular, but the colorful characters that are surrounding this whole ensemble really reinforces and makes this just a truly gem to watch. You've got Nathan Lane, you've got Tina Fey, you've got surprise guests. First season, you've got Sting playing like a weird version of himself, and the season 2, which just finished, we have Shirley MacLaine. So it's just been wonderful to see how these very familiar faces too are kind of brought in and become part of this unfolding narrative.
That's right. We, like you said, we've seen Steve Martin and Martin Short, collaborating many, many times over the years. Three Amigos and things like that, going way, way back. And then more recently, they had a kind of Broadway show together, didn't they? They sort of.
They did. Yes.
I forget the name of it, but kind of a live variety performance spectacular kind of thing, where they just go and tell really kind of hammy, cheesy, so bad they're funny again kind of jokes about each other at each other's expense. And it's this kind of old, I think they're trying to keep alive this old kind of Broadway tradition that people like Nathan Lane in particular seem to be part of this sort of dying breed of old sort of raconteur style humorists. And this seemed like a perfect way for them to simultaneously adapt to the modern evolution of the genre, both by doing a digital streaming series, which is what the show is, but also doing a podcast, while at the same time being the old fuddy-duddies who poke fun at it and don't quite understand how it works and are kind of muddling their way through. I mean, they're both playing sort of cultural dinosaurs, if you like. Steve Martin, almost wanting to say Steve McQueen. Steve Martin's character, is a kind of washed-up, semi-retired actor. He had a hit detective show show in the 90s. It reminded me a bit like, I think he wanted it to be like Columbo, but it seems that it might have been a bit closer to something like Diagnosis Murder with Dick Van Dyke or something like that. Something that was on after lunch when nobody's watching TV. And only your gran watches it, but she watches it every day.
Yeah. The show kind of reinforces that there is a familiarity that he has with new people that he runs into. It's like you're that guy. Like everybody has seen it. It's that popular enough, but it's not so popular except in his own mind about how, you know, the true popularity of this show that was 25 years ago.
Oh well, he has certainly, or his character, you know, Charles Hayden Savage, has never been able to get past this. This was, you know, his one hit, if you like. It's the one thing that he will always only be known for. Similarly, Martin Short plays a guy called Oliver Putnam, who is a failed, bankrupt, almost sort of Broadway director, who similarly is on Hard Times, and all they have, both of them, all they have left are these apartments in this very sort of old, increasingly sort of old and decaying,
dilapidated, yes.
I like the fact in the show, I like many things obviously, but how much that the identity of the building itself and the history of the building itself becomes very much part of the story as it goes on.
I mean, this is quintessentially New York. This is the building as a character in the show. It's very much populated with a New York sensibility throughout the whole, you know, the whole fabric of the show just drips with New York isms. I was going to ask you though, are you familiar with the TV show The Kominsky Method with Michael Douglas and Alan Arkin? Because
I'm vaguely familiar. I've seen a little bit of it. Yeah,
we love that show as well, and I noticed the similarities of the characters because both shows have these elderly characters who have established a certain level of wealth and notoriety, but not to the degree that, you know, they have in their own minds. They're both teams of cantankerous old men who have a bit of a heart of gold. They're genuinely good characters who struggle with performers' narcissism and their own egos. But the banter between Michael Douglas and Alan Arkin, who are just wonderful, wonderful actors. Again, it's a real. There's a similarity between the two shows, with then Steve Martin and Martin Short, that you have very talented, well-established actors that people have been familiar with for decades. People my age and your age have grown up with these actors. And so watching them come together and be cantankerous old men stumbling through life in an age that is increasingly unfamiliar with them it's fun to watch. What Only Murders in the Building adds that the Kominsky Method doesn't, though, is that third generation, not Generation X. What would Selena Gomez be?
She's a millennial.
She's a millennial. Okay,
yeah.
you drop a millennial into this concoction of cantankerous old men.
Musical superstar Sting.
The guy from U2.
Are you kidding me?
Sting.
The Police, Roxanne?
Every Breath You Take, only one of the biggest love songs of all time. Who educated you?
Oh, now I know. He did Sledgehammer.
It's Peter Gabriel.
Guys, I know who Sting is.
And she pulls it off. She has got this deadpan comedy going that just works through the whole show.
Yeah, I have to admit that when I approached the show initially, that was the one element of it that I was slightly trepidatious about. I was like, how, you know, because the relationship Short and Martin have, the shorthand that they have developed over decades of working together and working sort of in parallel. I was wondering how easy it would be for somebody of a completely different generation and a female performer as well to kind of get in and to find the vibe, really. And but I mean, I was really pleasantly surprised. She does a really good job. I mean, she does have that kind of eye roll, sort of okay boomer kind of sensibility, which is very much sort of part of the show. I mean, thankfully, they don't lean too heavy for too long onto that. You know, she very much becomes sort of a part of the family, if you like. I mean, to all intents and purposes, they're a couple of old queens. You know, they're not, but they might as well be. And she's sort of the surrogate granddaughter who's kind of been adopted because she happens to be also in the building. She's renovating her aunt's apartment there. There's no other way that she could afford to live there, I think. But she's essentially house sitting. And yeah, she just becomes kind of very much so because she is familiar with the victim in season 1, isn't she? And by season 2, they are all implicated in a second murder under their own roof. I was just gonna say, so that's why sort of circumstances push them together and keep them together. Whereas, in any real situation, they might naturally kind of drift apart after one awkward meeting.
Well, I think one of the reasons this works too, though, is it's a brilliantly done whodunit. That it really is a fun caper to watch. And unlike, I think it was Diagnosis Murder, or I'm sorry, not Diagnosis Murder, Murder, She Wrote with Angela Lansbury. It was notoriously known for, you couldn't really solve the thing because whatever she came out with at the end was evidence or relationship or knowledge that the viewer didn't have. So it wasn't really a well-constructed murder, and you got to participate in a whodunit. Whereas both seasons of Only Murders in the Building, the suspects obviously bounce around like billiard balls on a table during the course of the season, but once all the strings are pulled back together and you kind of see the whole canvas at the end from beginning to end, you think, oh, okay, yeah, I should have been able to figure that out. That was brilliantly put together. And I think that's what is some of the allure of it, is it genuinely feels like an Agatha Christie caper that can be solved.
I completely agree. It's the ultimate sort of Brazos mystery, which is the character that he used to play on the screen in the 90s. I think that's the central kind of gag, if you like, is that he's finally getting to live the life of the character that he made famous, or that made him famous back in the day. It's funny that you mention Agatha Christie as what it accomplishes, because that's the problem I've always had with Agatha Christie mysteries. Is exactly what you were fingering Angela Lansbury, for want of a better expression.
Yes, of course.
Particularly sort of Miss Marple mysteries. You are never given all the information.
No.
She always comes back and goes, oh, but of course you must remember the case of the missing child back in 1940. You're like, no, how would I know anything about that? There's sort of one vague allusion to it in the opening chapter or whatever, but that's sort of Murder on the Orient Express and all of the others. It's always something that has happened many, many months, years beforehand. But then but they use that device in this story. You can't not borrow from Agatha Christie. She was an absolute master storyteller. But I think you are right in that here. I think all the pieces are there, and there's nothing I love more than seeing some information that I've known for 4 episodes recontextualized suddenly. And you're like, oh, but of course, that's what that means. It didn't mean what I thought it meant. It means this, and I think it does actually do this incredibly well.
I think I agree with you in that Agatha Christie does have its holes in the plot that doesn't allow us to solve it ourselves. But I guess what I was trying to think, and I didn't really complete that thought as well as I would have liked, is that the eccentric characters that we get in Only Murders of the Building, there is just fun characters of high and low station. And that's what a lot of Agatha Christie, Death on the Nile, Murder on the Orient Express, there are these very eccentric characters that have really eccentric and crazy idiosyncrasies. And it really borrows from that kind of genre of the characters in this show, from Nathan Lane to Jane Lynch playing the body double for Steve Martin's Brazos character, the stunt person. And she's brilliant. They didn't even just bring her on for a little gag in one episode. She's been an ongoing element in the story, but it doesn't get old. It's not like it's a one gag wonder and they're just kind of they're playing on the same gag. They keep bringing her in these really crazy situations, even when she goes in to break up with the crazy date that's the girl that Steve Martin is dating that's in prison.
Jan,
and she goes,
Amy Ryan's character,
the cellist. And so even Jane Lynch is just used so wonderfully in this TV series.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point about the characters and the sort of upstairs, downstairs kind of element to it. It's like Gosford Park, or more recently Knives Out, even.
Yes. which is
brings in
going to
a
be a
lot of
sequel
those.
soon.
Sequel's
for that.
coming out this Christmas, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think all of those elements work to the fact that I will say that while you're watching, you don't really care who did it. What you care
No.
about is the journey, is the investigation, it's the patter and the banter between these characters. How most of the problems that they face are of their own making, and they can't help but get in each other's way the whole time. And that, like you were mentioning before, their egos, they are failed artists at the end of the day, and they wear all of those eccentricities and piccadillies proudly on their sleeves, almost as badges of honor that they have survived a career in showbiz, kind of thing. And I love all of that. Martin Short swanning around talking about the glory days of Broadway, trying to impart directorial knowledge on sort of preschoolers. During a performance of The Wizard of Oz and things like that. I think that's where the show sort of really works best. But you are right. It is constructed very well as a mystery that does, the breadcrumbs are scattered, enticingly. But I think it's this main trio that really holds it all together.
Absolutely. I mean, it's amazingly well written. The stories, even the subplots, the sidebars, the little encounters are all very, very fun to watch. And I was just going to take a small pushback when you talk about them being these failed artists. What really, in my view, what really makes them work is they're not completely failed. They each touch success a little bit. If they had been just failures and never had any success, they wouldn't have been near as interesting to watch.
Right.
They both have had a small measure of success in the big leagues. To use a baseball analogy, they got their moment in the show. They got to get into the batter's box, but they were never a star. They never made the All-Stars. They're not in the Hall of Fame, but in their minds, they got there. And so they're living with throughout the whole 2 seasons, those egos are dealing with the fact that they're at an age where their best years are behind them. And now they've got real excitement with this podcast that they're doing. They found something that's going to be their last hurrah. And I think they're living also a little bit vicariously through the Selena Gomez character, the young, she represents the youth and the vigor. And so, yes, I couldn't agree more. Despite all the wonderful, colorful characters, it's the chemistry of the 3 mains that make this really work.
Yeah, yes, I agree. I think it is the fact that they have tasted fame once that makes their present plight so tragic.
Yeah,
and
humorous for the viewer.
Oh yes, absolutely. Oh yes, it's all played for laughs. And yeah, they've got this final curtain, if you like, this last chance in a realm that sort of hides their age and their weaknesses and whatever, and plays to their strength, plays to their sort of ability to spin a good yarn. And they know that they're doing well because it has sort of invoked the wrath of arguably one of the heavy hitters in the industry. What's her name? Cindy Canning.
Yeah. Tina
Fey. Played by Tina Fey. Who not only has the sort of hit podcast that they were all fans of, which brought them all together, but their podcast does so well that it provokes her to create a spin-off podcast called Only Murderers in the Building, in which she's determined to prove that they are responsible for, well, at least one of the murders that has happened. And so it adds a sense of urgency to them solving the crime to prove their own innocence as much as prove who is responsible before the big dog in the ring proves them guilty first.
Yes.
I think there's a sense of genuine fear that they might get proved guilty, even though they obviously know that they are not responsible for it. But that said, I think one of the show's strengths is it never 100% allows the 3 of them to trust one another wholeheartedly. It keeps just a morsel of suspicion and doubt even amongst the 3 of them, and I think that works really, really well.
Oh, that's a good point to make, James, because you're right. Every time they draw close to one another and they're going to say, okay, no more lies, no more lies. Eventually, somebody will have a relationship with the murderer or something, connection somewhere that they're not telling the other two about. And it just leads to that, like you said, that little kernel of distrust in the triumvirate there.
Sure, which only serves the drama within this comedy all the more, because they're in this together, and if one of them is responsible for it, then that's going to be a problem. I mean, one of the other elements I like is that it's not afraid to take a moment away from the investigation, if you like, to explore the family relationships and the personal relationships of each of the characters. I mean, in season 2 we see Steve Martin has a daughter coming, or a stepdaughter, who sort of comes in and becomes sort of part of the family, if you like, part of his life. Martin Short similarly has a strange relationship with his adult son.
Yes,
which is explored in detail here, and then Selena Gomez has all kinds of various slightly insidious ties with the building, and because she, like we said, her aunt owns one of the apartments. Let's see, she used to spend a lot of time in the building when she was a child, and that figured in more strongly in season 1, as kind of the baton of that role has been somewhat passed to Steve Martin's stepdaughter character in season 2. But they are familiar with the building in a very different way to Steve Martin and Martin Short's characters, who for them it's merely they're always saying that this is the only thing that they own. It's all they have is this apartment.
Martin Short's son keeps saying, Dad, just sell the apartment. You have all kinds of money. I can't. It's the only thing I have. And you just know that to separate that apartment from him would just steal his identity of who he is at his core. Just picking up what you're saying earlier, too, about that the writers are not afraid to go out and explore some of the family issues. I thought one of the best episodes dealt with the victim in the second season, Bunny's last day.
Oh yeah,
and it turned this old cantankerous Jewish woman who you think would have no feelings, and by the end of her last day, you're totally sympathetic for this lady who, everybody brings their own baggage to the table. Everybody's got their own story, and when we get to peek behind the curtain and see a little Bunny story, we realize that some of the assumptions we made about her and some of the maybe prejudices and prejudgments we've made, they don't pan out. And you're left kind of feeling, again, you know what? Everyone's got a story. Everybody has things under the hood. And this show does a wonderful job at setting up a character, and you think it's going to be this way. And then it kind of gives you a little backstory, and the fuller picture emerges, giving a deeper and more rich character.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how they're able to get so much mileage out of the fact that, their podcast, and by extension the show, covers only murders in the building. You'd think, well, that's only going to happen once. And obviously it happens at least twice, because you've got kind of 2 seasons of it. And I think that's sort of a continued celebration of the fact that, this commentary on urban living. And on the one hand, it's a very Hong Kong, very New York thing. But here we are in Hong Kong, where we, if you live in an apartment building, you're sharing the same roof with hundreds, if not thousands, of people whom you know almost nothing about.
Yes.
Yeah, you're living in such close proximity. Here, they've got the luxury of there are slightly fewer people, but there are certainly, it would certainly be easy enough to introduce more characters every season or even every episode, so-and-so who lives sort of 3 floors down and 1 flat over, who we haven't seen up until this point, but is now an integral piece of the puzzle. And they do take time out to explore, what's his name, Howard, the cat guy, who was kind of a suspect at one point in season 1, and now he becomes sort of a more interesting character for other reasons in season 2, and we see a glimpse into his sort of potential love life and dating life. There's a running joke about a talking parrot in this
Oh,
series
yes,
as
that's
well.
right. Yes. Yeah.
And then there is obviously as well, on top of all of that, there's the staff, not just Bunny, but there's Bunny's successor, Nina Lin, played by Christine Koh, who's a sort of this Asian battle axe who's come in, who's determined to kind of completely transform the building in ways that I don't think anybody's going to be too happy about.
I don't think so. Yeah.
The old doorman, who gets a nice little sort of subplot during this second season as well.
But case in point, with the Asian landlady who's going to take over for Bunny, she is presented as this battle axe, as you say, until she sits down with the doorman, and then her heart opens up a little bit, and she realizes, maybe I have been seeing people through the lens of whether they're useful or not, and not seeing maybe the fullness of people's lives. And so again, it's another case in point of how this show really pulls back the curtain on what really makes people tick. And considering the polarization, which I often mention in these reviews that are going on in the world, where we tend to just put people in categories, this person's of this and this person's of that, this show goes to great pains to show you initially that someone is just a this or just a that, and then they say, oh, well, but once you hear their story, you might have a different thought. And they don't do that just once or twice. This is an ongoing tool that they've used in this show.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that they it's what one of the strengths of it is, as we said right from the outset, it's the depth of the cast of this ensemble. That must have been such a challenge and or a joy, who knows, to have cast in the first place, because so many characters who initially seem important or initially seem sort of peripheral inevitably sort of work their way into the mystery in one way or another. There are very few innocent bystanders in all of this, which is great. I mean, because obviously the series ends with a tease of what's to come in season 3, and without much explanation at all. It jumps forward a year, but without much explanation, it suggests that there's going to be a murder outside the building.
Oh, but I have every confidence it'll be connected to something inside the building.
Me too. Yeah. I mean, we're left with the image of, well, it's Paul Rudd,
yes,
who we know has actually signed on to be in season 3. I imagine only in flashbacks, but we shall see. As a Broadway actor at a big gala performance, who sort of appears to drop dead right there on stage.
And we're led to believe that his relationship with Steve Martin is strained, to say the least.
Yes, and that by the time the curtain raises on opening night, things are close to breaking point already.
Yeah.
So
I saw an interview with
them.
I saw an interview with the showrunner who said that when they brought Steve Martin aboard, one of the conditions he had was that every season had to be a self-contained murder. He wasn't going to. There could be nothing that, oh, next season it's going to be a cliffhanger. You got to wait till next season to figure out. No, it's. And so what they did was the cliffhanger is the next murder.
It's the
but
prompt,
everything is clean in a single season.
Yeah, it's not going to be a Twin Peaks style thing where it just rambles on and then gets kind of solved halfway through the following season, and you're like, okay. No, I mean, it makes perfect sense and it works really, really well. You wrap everything up, but no sooner. I mean, the way season 1 ends, they're literally on the balcony celebrating the success of wrapping up the murder when she goes back inside to get more champagne and discovers Bunny is
right.
dead. And she's kneeling over the body. Season 2 does have a little bit of a jump at the end, but that's perfectly fine. It would be a little too much to swallow if it was literally sort of the same evening yet again. But it leaves so much possibility, and so many unanswered questions. So it's really stepping it up once more. And I think it seems to be creating a stage in which the characters are going to be exposed far more to elements of their old lives, because it is going to be taking place, or at least in the proximity of Broadway theaters and stages and that lifestyle.
Yeah.
far more so than we have seen so far.
I told you, all these lead people, that's really what they want to do. 5, 6, 7, 8. As soon as they end, I thought, this is where this is all leading. Hooray, So jazz hands, it's all going to go.
Absolutely. I can't wait.
Yeah, me neither. Bring on season 3. So James, drawing this to a close, what measurement would we use for Only Murders in the Building to score this? I think we're agreed on is a wonderful series.
It's a little ephemeral, but podcast downloads or
How many podcast downloads? It sounds good to me.
Okay, well, why don't you kick us off?
All right. Obviously we've been praising this song. We've been praising this show for the last 30 minutes or so. The depth, the character development, the wonderful chemistry between Martin Short, Steve Martin, Selena Gomez, the wonderful cast of side characters. This show just hits on every level. It's just fun to watch. It's entertaining. It's what great TV is supposed to be. So I'm going to give it 4.5 out of 5 podcast downloads. I can't wait for season 3. I will be watching it from day one.
Right. Yeah. I mean, pretty similar for me. I remember when the season 1, well, actually it was when the day Disney Plus was launched in Hong Kong. And I immediately subscribed to it, and I was flicking through, and that was a show that popped up because obviously Hulu is Fox, which is all Disney now, especially here. That everybody had been buzzing about for a couple of months already, and I sat down and I binged the whole season 1 in a single day. And when season 2 looped around, it took me 2 days, but I blew through it pretty fast. It's effortlessly entertaining, it's engaging, it's absorbing, it hooks you in and in and in, so you just have to keep going. Every episode ends on a brilliant sort of reveal or cliffhanger or lead into what's happening next. And it's just thoroughly enjoyable. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but at the same time, it doesn't half-ass the mystery.
No,
as well, which it could easily have gone one way or the other and been far too much of an indulgence and just kind of gone, oh yeah, and somebody something. But it doesn't at all. And so similarly, I had great fun with it, and can't wait for season 3. I don't do half points, and it's not quite perfect, but I'm going to give it a rock solid 4 podcast downloads out of 5.
Well, that's our opinion. What do you think about Only Murders in the Building? We look forward to hearing your perspective. Feel free to give us a comment in the box below. And James and I are on social media, so you can find us on Twitter and Instagram, and those links are also in the description box below. James?
That's right. Let us know if there's any other shows that we should be checking out, anything similar to Only Murders in the Building, anything completely different, but you think that we might respond to. Do let us know in the comments. Check out some of our other videos. We've got some series, including Every Best Picture up there as well. And again, just let us know if there's anything else you'd like us to watch.
Till next episode.
Bye-bye.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.